You wake up, drive to traffic, get to work. Your exigent boss makes you angry. But you can't say anything otherwise, you're fired. Drive again in the traffic. And when you get home, guess what? Your wife is more stressed than you, because she works too. And now you have to make dinner together despite you're exhausted. And what if I told you that this keeps you poorer and poorer every day? You start realizing that the math you thought was working in your favor has actually been working against you for years. And the reason it keeps defeating you is because you were never taught to analyze the real cost of a second income. Not in the abstract way people talk about budgeting, but in the practical, day-to-day pressure that shapes where you live, how much you spend, the risks you take, and the lack of margin that leaves you one bad week away from financial freefall. So make sure to stay until the end to really understand what happens. Leave a like and let's start. The real trap. Begins long before the money even arrives in your hands. It starts the moment you believe that adding another salary automatically increases your security. On paper, it makes sense. If one income is good, two incomes must be better. If one income can theoretically keep a family afloat, then two incomes should give you breathing room, savings, investments, stability, and options. That is what everyone assumes. That is what most couples still believe when they start building a household together. But the reality operates by a different set of rules. The moment you rely on two incomes, the foundation of your life becomes more fragile, not stronger, and the hidden costs begin to climb slowly in ways most people never track. You think you are multiplying your power, but you are actually multiplying your financial exposure, and the consequences become visible only when something goes wrong, which it always does at some point. To understand why this happens, you need to look at the fixed costs that expand the moment two incomes are present. These are not luxury expenses. These are not impulse purchases. These are structural commitments that shape the next 20 or 30 years of your life. Start with housing, because housing's always the first domino. When a lender looks at your financial profile, they do not care about your stress levels, your actual monthly responsibilities, or your long-term stability. They look at the total income number. If that number is higher, you qualify for a more expensive home. And most people, without realizing it, choose a home based on what they qualify for, not what is strategically wise. This means you end up selecting a mortgage size for two incomes instead of one. You lock yourself into a structure that demands that both people keep earning at the same pace, with no room for illness, layoffs, burnout, or unexpected transitions. The mortgage alone becomes the silent enforcer that keeps both partners chained to full-time work. But housing's only the beginning. Transportation costs nearly always double, because two jobs in two different locations require two cars, two commutes, two sets of repairs, two insurance policies, and double the wear and tear. A car is not just a vehicle, it is a financial commitment that drains hundreds of dollars every single month, and when you have two of them, that drain becomes a constant weight. Yet most people never connect this cost directly to the presence of a second income. They assume the car is necessary, and they miss the fact that the necessity itself was created by the structure of dual employment. Then comes childcare, the expense that quietly erases entire salaries. Many families do not calculate the true net benefit of the second income. They calculate the gross, they look at the total number and tell themselves that the household has more money. But in reality, the second income is often consumed almost entirely by childcare, transportation, taxes, convenience, spending, and the exhaustion-driven purchases that inevitably appear when two adults have no time or energy left. When you return home after long hours, after commuting, after deadlines, after constant pressure, you stop thinking about financial optimization and start thinking about survival. You order takeout instead of cooking. You pay for services instead of doing things yourself. You try to save time because you have no time. And time, in a dual-income household, becomes one of the most expensive commodities of all. The financial strain grows even more subtle when you consider the emotional and psychological load that accompanies the structure. When two adults work full-time, there is almost no margin for error. A sick child is not just a stressful moment. It is a logistical crisis. Someone must stay home, rearrange meetings, use vacation days, or risk losing income. When you are already stretched thin, that single disruption triggers a chain reaction. Work suffers, tension rises, and money becomes even tighter. The second income does not provide flexibility. It removes it. It locks the family into a rigid cycle where every hour must be accounted for, where every disruption becomes a threat, and where every unexpected expense feels catastrophic. And this is where the trap tightens further. When both partners work, the household becomes dependent on both incomes to maintain the fixed costs. It no longer has the safety net that older generations had when one parent worked and the other could step in during emergencies. Even if the second parent did not have a job immediately, they had the possibility to earn if needed. That was the backup plan. But in a two-income structure, the backup plan is already deployed. There is no reserve worker, no extra capacity. If one income disappears, the fixed expenses remain anchored at their dual income level, and the margin collapses instantly. What once looked like financial strength transforms into vulnerability. Imagine you are in this situation, and you decide to run the numbers honestly. You take the second income and subtract taxes, childcare, commuting, extra transportation, convenience spending, and the stress-related costs that accumulate quietly. You start realizing that the net value of that salary is dramatically lower than you ever expected. It might be $10,000 a year. It might be $5,000. In some cases, it is zero or even negative. Families have gone into debt while both partners were working full-time, believing that earning more would solve their problems, not realizing that the second income was creating a financial structure that demanded more spending, not less. But the biggest danger appears not in the monthly numbers, but in the long-term commitments. When a family chooses a home based on two incomes, they are not just selecting a house. They are selecting a lifestyle that cannot contract. They are choosing a neighbourhood, a school district, a level of property tax, a commuting distance, a social environment, and a set of expectations that must be maintained. When a family chooses cars based on two incomes, they are often choosing financing options that create ongoing debt. When they choose childcare based on two incomes, they are not just buying supervision. They are buying time at the expense of wealth. And when they commit to these expenses simultaneously, they unknowingly build a life with no escape routes. This is why the two-income trap is so destructive. It is not about laziness, overspending, or bad money habits. It is about structural commitments that accumulate silently until they control every financial decision. It is about households that appear prosperous from the outside but feel suffocated on the inside. It is about couples who work harder than ever and still feel like they are standing on unstable ground. And the most dangerous part is that the trap disguises itself as progress. It looks like opportunity. It looks like upward mobility. It looks like modern success. But it is a success that demands everything and gives very little in return. To break free, you need to understand that the second income should not be treated as guaranteed fuel for lifestyle expansion. It should be treated as temporary, fragile, unpredictable, and optional. That may sound unrealistic at first, but it is the foundation of financial stability. When you build your fixed costs around one income, you create options. You create room to breathe. You create space for emergencies, flexibility for career changes, and the possibility for one partner to reduce work when needed without destroying the entire financial structure. One income covers survival. The second income becomes strategy. And strategy is where wealth is built. What most households do instead is use the second income for survival and hope that somehow the numbers will work out. But hope is not a plan. Hope is not security. Hope does not pay the mortgage when layoffs come. Only structure does. Only margin does. Only intentional financial design does. And when you finally understand this, the numbers start making sense. The panic you feel every month has an explanation. The exhaustion you feel every week has a cause. The pressure that never seems to lift is not bad luck or poor management. It is the mechanical effect of running a life that requires two full incomes to function. And once you see it, you cannot return to ignoring it. You start noticing how every major expense in your environment is designed around the assumption that two incomes are available. You see how lenders, real estate agents, school districts, employers, and even social expectations reinforce that assumption. You see how the entire structure of modern middle-class life depends on families stretching themselves thin, and you start realizing that the system is not built to make you prosperous. It is built to keep you working. Picture a household where both partners wake up every morning already feeling behind, not because they are irresponsible, but because their entire financial structure depends on constant motion. They cannot pause, they cannot slow down, they cannot reconsider the pace of their lives because everything they own, everything they pay for, and everything they are committed to requires that both incomes continue flowing without interruption. This situation is far more common than most people realise. It is the quiet reality behind millions of families who appear stable on the outside but feel trapped on the inside. They are not struggling because they lack discipline. They are struggling because their fixed costs have grown larger than any margin two incomes can truly provide. The second income is often presented as a path to comfort, but in practice it frequently becomes the reason comfort disappears. When both adults in a household work full-time, especially in today's environment, the amount of stress placed on the structure increases in ways that cannot be measured simply by looking at take-home pay. Stress has financial consequences. Stress creates expenses. Stress pushes people to outsource tasks they no longer have the time or energy to complete themselves. And each one of these adjustments quietly eats away at the value of the second income until the household becomes dependent on a salary that barely moves the needle. The environment surrounding dual-income households adds more pressure. Most people naturally choose a home located near where both partners work, but workplaces are rarely in the same direction or distance. This forces families into long commutes or compromises that increase fuel usage, raise insurance premiums, create more repair costs, and shorten the lifespan of their vehicles. When you factor in these expenses honestly, you start to see that commuting is not just transportation. It is a long-term financial burden that grows larger year after year. And because most dual-income families face no alternative, they simply absorb the costs without questioning the long-term impact. Now consider what happens when children enter the picture. Childcare is not optional for working parents. It is mandatory, and the price is not symbolic. It is substantial, often one of the largest expenses a household faces. Many families do not realise that the cost of childcare rises steadily with age until the child reaches school, and even then, after-school programs, summer care, and transportation fees continue to consume a large portion of income. When you add these expenses to the mandatory commuting and the expanded housing costs that accompany dual-income households, the total burden rises to a level that would have seemed unthinkable a generation ago. The system reinforces these costs subtly. When families choose homes in good school districts, they are not simply paying for a place to live. They are paying for educational access, and the access is priced into the mortgage. The good school district premium pushes families into loans that stretch their budgets even further. And because these areas tend to have higher property taxes, higher insurance costs, and a general culture of higher spending, the fixed cost of living increases in ways few people fully calculate upfront. As a result, the second income is absorbed before it has a chance to create financial security. Financial fragility then becomes the norm. A household running on two full incomes has no spare capacity, no backup plan, and no buffer for the unexpected. If either partner faces a health issue, a layoff, a reduction in hours, or a change in job location, the entire structure becomes unstable. The mortgage, the car payments, the childcare expenses, the insurance premiums, the property taxes, and every other fixed cost continue demanding payment, even though the income side has been disrupted. This is the moment when couples finally understand how little their two incomes were doing for them. But by then, the commitments are often too large to unwind easily. It is important to understand that the trap is not caused by the second income itself. The problem arises from the way households organise their financial lives around it. When people assume that the second income will always be available, they start structuring their expenses as if it were permanent. They upgrade their home. They upgrade their vehicles. They upgrade their lifestyle. They take on obligations that feel manageable when both incomes are present, but become impossible when one disappears. These commitments lock them into a pattern where the requirement to maintain two jobs becomes non-negotiable. To avoid this scenario, the first step is recognising that flexibility is more valuable than income. A household designed around one primary income has the freedom to adapt. A household built around two incomes does not. The difference between these two structures is not philosophical, it is financial engineering. When you reduce your fixed costs to the level where a single income can sustain them, something powerful happens. You gain margin. Margin gives you choices. Margin gives you time. Margin gives you the ability to breathe. And most importantly, margin protects you from the volatility that inevitably appears in every working life. This does not mean one partner must stop working. It means the household should not depend on both partners working full-time to survive. The second income should become a strategic tool, not a survival mechanism. When the second income is freed from the obligation of covering fixed costs, it can be directed toward building actual wealth. It can fund an emergency reserve that protects the family from shocks. It can accelerate debt repayment. It can increase retirement contributions. It can be invested in assets that generate income on their own. It can transform from a fragile stream into a powerful engine for long-term stability. Imagine a family earning a combined $130,000 per year. If they structure their essential expenses around the $75,000 salary and treat the $55,000 salary as a variable tool, they create a financial model fundamentally different from most households in their income bracket. They no longer need both incomes to pay the mortgage. They no longer rely on both incomes to cover transportation costs. They no longer fear the possibility of one partner facing employment disruption. Their lifestyle is built on a solid foundation, not on a delicate balance that can collapse with one unexpected event. This structure also changes the psychological experience of work. When your entire financial existence depends on your paycheck, every bad day feels like a threat. Every rumor of layoffs becomes a source of anxiety. Every performance review becomes a moment of fear. But when your household does not depend on your income for survival, work becomes something you can approach. With confidence, you are not trapped. You are choosing to participate. That difference affects your mental health, your long-term career decisions, and your sense of autonomy. Another critical advantage of treating the second income as strategic is its ability to accelerate financial independence. When the second income is not tied to ongoing expenses, it can be invested consistently. Unlike random savings or occasional contributions, consistent investing transforms the household's financial trajectory. Over time, these investments begin producing real returns. They compound, they grow, they start generating income streams that supplement or even replace earned income. This is the point where real security emerges, not from earning more, but from reducing the dependency on earned income in the first place. The shift toward a one-income foundation also reduces exposure to lifestyle inflation. When both partners work, there is a natural tendency to upgrade spending in small ways that accumulate quickly. You eat out more because you are tired, you hire help because you lack time, you pay for convenience because your energy is depleted. These decisions feel harmless in the moment, but over months and years, they add up to thousands of dollars that could have been used to buy financial freedom. The more your life requires convenience purchases to sustain itself, the less freedom you actually have. By contrast, when your household expenses are low enough to be supported by one income, these convenience purchases remain optional rather than mandatory. You choose them when they make sense. You avoid them when they do not. Your financial life becomes intentional instead of reactive. And intentionality is one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available to ordinary people. Many families never consider this model because it feels like swimming against the current. Society expects households to maximize income, maximize productivity, and maximize lifestyle. But maximizing everything at once is exactly what causes households to become fragile. Strength comes from restraint, not expansion. It comes from designing a life that does not require two people to operate at full capacity every single day. It comes from creating a structure that can support you even when life becomes unpredictable. The path forward begins with an honest review of your fixed costs. Housing, transportation, childcare, insurance, taxes, and essential utilities are the pillars. If these pillars exceed what a single income can reliably support, the household becomes locked in the two-income trap. If they can be reduced to fit within one income, the household gains the most valuable asset of all: control. Control over your time. Control over your decisions. Control over the direction of your life. This adjustment does not happen overnight. It requires planning, discipline, and a willingness to ignore social expectations. But the rewards far outweigh the sacrifices. When your financial structure is built on one income and strengthened by the second, you begin to experience something rare in today's world: the absence of financial panic. You stop worrying about the next unexpected bill. You stop feeling trapped in your job. You stop fearing the possibility of sudden change. You start building wealth on your own terms, at your own pace. And as the years pass, the results become visible. Savings accumulate, investments grow, debts shrink. Your financial life expands rather than contracts. You are no longer dependent on constant motion to stay afloat. You have air, you have stability, you have options that most dual-income households never experience. Not because they earn more, but because they require less. This is the paradox most families never understand. Two incomes do not automatically reduce risk, they often multiply it. The key to breaking the cycle is not earning more, but designing your financial structure so that you no longer need both incomes to survive. Once you achieve that, the second income becomes a wealth-building machine instead of a source of constant pressure. And that transformation changes everything about the way you live, work, plan, and build your future. When you stop building your life around two mandatory incomes and start structuring everything around one solid foundation, the pressure finally lifts, margin returns, flexibility returns, and the second income becomes a tool for building stability instead of something you depend on just to keep the lights on. This shift is what protects families, not bigger paychecks or working harder, but a structure that can survive real life. I do not want to make an overlong speech, so I will leave you with this. Change the foundation, and everything above it becomes easier. Reduce what you need, increase what you can save, and use the second income to buy back your freedom. If this opened your eyes, subscribe and move to the next video so you can keep building the life you know you should already have, and I'll see you soon. Just a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only, and any results depend on your own decisions and actions.